Well, good morning, everybody. Before we begin, we have lots of people to say hello to. Maureen Sullivan, who you can see is dressed annoying. We are having readers now, and you're always welcome to join us. Melissa, Sam, Nick, Serge, Mary, and Nanette are offering to be readers. We're always welcoming readers. We're expanding our tech team. Nick, Donald, and Serge are now helping Margarita, and they'll be doing services from time to time. Our annual meeting is the 24th of January. For those of you who are wondering what an annual meeting is, this is when the congregation votes on a budget and any new things we need to do for the new year. It is for members, and if you ask how you become a member, you just ask to become a member. We are terribly lax about what it means to be a member in this group, which is perfectly fine. That's the way we've always operated. If you consider yourself a member, then you're a member. If not, you're not. We're very, very, except for matters of voting, we really don't worry about that. But for voting, we have to know who actually is on the rolls to vote. Class begins on the 9th. We're going to have a class on Saturday mornings at 10 o'clock. Actually, we're finally getting to the 11 groups that started after Jesus died. What else do I want to remind everybody? Yes. I want you to hold in your dear prayers my laptop. My laptop is being loaned out to Serge to do the tech on Christmas Eve. My laptop may be loaned out to Nick if something fritzes with his laptop. I am thinking about getting a second laptop just in case. So just remember, tech, without tech, we are sunk. It is amazing. By the way, have any of you ever lost your phone?
Yes.
Have any of you ever lost your phone and you realize you don't exist? Yes. Seriously, you don't have your phone, you are not. You don't exist.
Oh, I don't care.
Have you ever noticed if you're upstairs and you leave your phone downstairs that you can't get to anything, that you need your phone? It's annoying. So without tech it is. So let's begin then. You have a copy of your service. Let's begin then with a lighting of the menorah. And if you would so much.
Okay, hang on. Are we lighting the menorah?
Yes, or however you're going to do it.
I was going to show you a picture of my lit menorah because Hanukkah's finished.
You what?
Hanukkah is finished.
I know, but we had no choice, remember?
That's true. Hang on a sec. I'm coming to get my menorah and a candle. And okay, here we go. All right. It's 1 spoon less, but we're going to do the menorah. Ready? Somehow. Oh, Lord. All right, excuse me. I didn't realize it would be an action. Okay, hold on a sec.
Oh, wait. You didn't hear that?
This, by the way, is calling for a very famous Jewish phrase, oy vey.
Okay, here we go. Where did I put all that? All right, excuse me, move. Where's the all right, sorry about this. This is very, very wallaching. All right, got it. Okay, so this is my menorah. Here, bear with me. Out. And I had this all done before. All right. Got it.
Nope.
Okay, this is our menorah. Where are we?
That's a coffee machine.
No, here. All right.
With spoons?
Oh,
Put it
wow.
over here. All right, how's that?
Wow.
All right.
Lovely.
Say it again.
Okay, so we normally put our menorah by the kitchen window See, it's an action photo. Kitchen window menorah. Okay, you see that? Can anyone see the menorah?
Yes.
Is
Okay.
everybody going to say the blessing, or is it too late because Hanukkah's over?
Well, we can do it together. More, you want to help me do it? All right.
Sure.
So the menorah, my menorah is really old. But when Chelsea was very little, there's a book called The Nine Spoons, which is a really lovely story about women in a Holocaust camp who get spoons together and make a menorah. So we did this as a family project, and we've been doing it ever since. So the top candle, which is here, is a special candle called the shamash. And this is used to light all the other candles. The other candles are all holy, and you don't really work with them. But the top candle is the one that you do the work with. So we're going to take this over to the oven. No, that didn't sound good, did it? Sorry. Okay, here we go. Okay. So you don't get this in too many videos, do you? Okay, here you go. That's it. See the candle? Okay, moving past the fan. And all right. And this is the first night. We're going to pretend it's the first night, okay, guys? Okay, so we're lighting the first night. This is time travel. And this is going to go up here because and there we are. So this is the first night of Hanukkah. There we go. Did that help? Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay,
Yeah.
so that was my menorah with the two candles. And normally it's night outside because we do it at sundown. Basically, it's to show everyone that the light of hope and religion is still shining, because this was an outcome of a civil war, and the temple was defiled. And they went to the temple and they found one little phial of oil, and the oil burnt for 7 days instead of just one. And that's the official story. There we go. Sorry, that's my husband. Yeah. Excuse me.
Beautiful.
Okay, so there we go. So, and apparently you have to have the light in one line, otherwise you confuse people. That's what the rabbis, don't ask me why, but anyway, so there we go. So that's, and the official line is that they tried to kill us, they failed, let's eat. Thank
All
you.
right, Rowena, why don't you and Nanette then give us the blessing? Say
Oh
it
my
together.
Do I have to? Okay.
I don't even know if I remember it all, but let's give it a shot. Baruch
Two words.
atah Adonai
Amen.
Eloheinu melech haolam
Melech haolam, asher kishanu b'mitzvotav, letivanu, l'idei shel Hanukkah.
Oh, you sang it. I don't.
That is our attempt then, ladies and gentlemen, of remembering our Jewish heritage from Hanukkah, the rededication of the Second Temple. And as Rowena pointed out, there is one candle called the Shamash, and that lights all the other ones. It's a reminder of light overcomes darkness and celebration of light versus evil.
Yeah.
For that, we are thankful. And we missed Hanukkah's beginning and end, but we do it symbolically for our Jewish heritage within the UUA.
Which actually is a modern analogy, because our meter died and FPL took our power away, but we still triumphed and we have light now.
All right. We now have a beginning for our service after the menorah with George Fox University. It is a very, very well-known Quaker school in the United States, and they have a tremendous choir and they have a tremendous orchestra. They're from California, and they will provide music for us today. Our opening hymn, for those of you who wish to quietly follow, is a very famous one for the Christmas season, Angels We Have Heard on High. The Society of Friends, unfortunately called Quakers, have been a very, very strong movement since the roughly 1600s in England, talking about democracy, giving roles to women early on in our history in terms of leadership, very, very heavily into peace movements. The worship services are very, very quiet, and people are given time to meditate, practicing, if you will, mindfulness before people were aware of what mindfulness was in the 21st century. Our service today will involve many readings from the prophet Isaiah. The prophet Isaiah wrote roughly about 2,700 years ago and was active in Jerusalem. Many of his words may become familiar because they have been used throughout Christian worship for at least 2,000 years. We'll read the calls to worship responsively. I'll ask you to remain muted, but if you'd read them with me at home, if you would read the R. For to us a child has been born, a son is given to us. Authority rests upon his shoulders, and he is named Wonderful Counselor, Mighty God, Everlasting Father, Prince of Peace. His authority shall grow continually, and there shall be endless peace. He will establish it and uphold it with justice and with righteousness from this time onward and forevermore. The zeal of the Lord of hosts will do this. And for those of you who would, if you would join me in the following prayer. May this Christmas we light candles of joy, despite all sadness, candles of hope where despair keeps watch, candles for courage, for fear ever present, candles of peace for tempest-tossed days, candles of grace to ease heavy burdens, candles of love to inspire all living. May their light shine all the year long. Amen. And again from the prophet Isaiah, Mary Grimmy will read to us.
For a child has been born for us, a son given to us. Authority rests upon his shoulders, and he is named Wonderful Counselor, Mighty God, Everlasting Father, Prince of Peace. His authority shall grow continually, and there shall be endless peace for the throne of David and his kingdom. He will establish and uphold it with justice and righteousness from the time onward and forevermore. The zeal of the Lord of hosts will do this.
It's like it was written for today and is written decades ago. I'll ask you at home to read the spots that are in bullet. Are we ready? There is a better thing than the observance of Christmas Day, and that is keeping Christmas. Are you willing to forget what you have done for other people and to remember what other people have done for you? To ignore what the world owes you and to think what you owe the world. To see that men and women are just as real as you are and try to look behind their faces to their hearts hungry for joy. To close your book of complaints against the management of the universe and look around you for a place where you can sow a few seeds of happiness. Are you willing to stoop down and consider the needs and desires of little children? To remember the weakness and loneliness of people growing old? To stop asking how much your friends love you and ask yourself whether you love them enough? To trim your lamp so it will give more light? To make a grave for your ugly thoughts and a garden for your kindly feelings with a gate open? Are you willing to believe that love is the strongest thing in the world, stronger than hate, stronger than evil, stronger than death? And that the blessed life which began in Bethlehem 1900 years ago is the image and brightness of eternal love? then you can keep Christmas. And if you can keep it for a day, why not always? We're reading Nick to read from the Gospel of Luke, and the scroll that Jesus read was also from Isaiah. Nick, if you would.
When he came to Nazareth, where he had been brought up, he went to the synagogue on the day Sabbath day, as was his custom. He stood up to read, and the scroll of the prophet Isaiah was given to him. He unrolled the scroll and found the place where it was written, "The Spirit of the Lord is upon me, because he has anointed me to bring good news to the poor. He has sent me to proclaim release to the captives and recovery of sight to the blind. He let the oppressors go free, to proclaim the new year of the Lord's favor." And he rolled up the scroll, gave it back to the attendant, and sat down. The eyes of all in the synagogue were fixed on him.
Thank you. And now some special music from Glee. Grant us, we ask, to speak, to hear, and to learn, so that our fears may be banished, our minds may become enlightened, our faith be increased, and our steps directed towards you. Amen. You know, sometimes I get myself in a mess. Those of you who know me know that would be not sometimes, regularly would be the answer to that, really. So we look at Advent, and the old thing of Advent is, number one, nobody knows exactly when it started, but it was probably up north in Europe when it was cold, and the peasants and the monks were about penance and dark and cold and smoting of the breast. And then you're waiting for the second coming, and then you're waiting for the birth of Jesus. But since you're lousy, wretched, miserable, and sinful, you need to be in penance. Well, then comes along liberal Christianity and says, that's really not so cool. Let's look at it from a very, very different way. And then the Unitarians suggest, we can even push that further. So let's talk about waiting. And we talked about it last time, and anticipation. So I thought, great, we'll talk about anticipation, not having any clue whatsoever what that meant. No idea whatsoever. I heard anticipation. Did I mention prefrontal cortex? Excuse me, I digress. Anyway, so I'm talking about anticipation, and I think about Carly Simon. Anticipation. Carly Simon from 1971. It turns out, not only do I know nothing about anticipation, I don't even know why the song was written. It was written because she was waiting for her then boyfriend at the time, Cat Stevens, whose name has been changed, to come for dinner, and he was late. So in anticipation of him and dinner, she writes the song. I didn't know that. All I know is anticipation, which brings me to Heinz ketchup. I remember the famous Heinz ketchup thing, obviously written in the 1970s for the little kids or white little boys with blonde hair and blue eyes. The idea that we've got Black and Southeast Asian and Mexican and Hispanic and everything else in the country was, of course, beside the point then in the 1970s. And we see this kid with this thing of ketchup. Now, it turns out I think I'm the only person in the world that doesn't get ketchup, but I guess everybody else in the world gets ketchup. I remember Maria Teresa said to me, "You have no ketchup in the refrigerator." I remember that. And I thought, how could you not have ketchup? Anyway, the famous commercial when you get the little kids together and there's a hamburger and you're waiting, anticipating ketchup. Did I mention prefrontal cortex? All right, so I look up anticipation and I realize I don't have any clue what I'm talking about. None whatsoever. So I decided to do what I always do when I do little. I ask people, what do you think about anticipation? So I asked friends on Facebook. I asked people at All Souls, what do you anticipate? And this is what I got. I got from Facebook way too many responses. Be careful what you ask for. And it boils down to 3. people couldn't wait. The number one thing for was January 20th. That was the number one thing that people were anticipating. January 20th. That's all I'm going to say, January 20th. The second thing was end of COVID and waiting for the vaccine. That came in a distant second. And close to that was, I can't wait to see my family and friends again without mask and without distance. And that was the overwhelming top three by large. And number one, waiting for January 20th, was by far and away the largest one. So then I decided to ask All Souls, and what do we get? One of our members wrote something that I thought was really cool. She wrote, anticipating for mean, sociopathic, manipulating people to realize the harm they do, and I'm anticipating them doing that and becoming loving and kind. Then she realized, I wrote this isn't going to happen, but I can still anticipate it anyway. And she writes, I'm hoping for healing and energy. Okay. Then one of us pointed out that they have a grandchild due in April. They're anticipating a grandchild and decided to name him Yoda, which is a fine name. I just hope the grandchild doesn't look like Yoda. All right. Then we have Serge wrote down that he was, where is this? Serge, where are you? Serge wrote, I am highly anticipating the day that I can see everyone's beautiful smiles again. I'm 100% for masks, but I miss smiles. Psychologically, they've written that when somebody walks in the room and they smile, everybody relaxes. Did you know that? If everybody's grumpy or everybody's feeling somebody walks in and they're just smiling, you know, it relaxes everybody. I remember once somebody said to me, you know, I really get annoyed when you smile. What are you really thinking when you, what's behind the smile? I said, you just be happy. Sometimes people don't like happy people around. Others wrote the following, and I thought this was just interesting. I learned how to wait during 21 years of practice as a nurse midwife. It did not come naturally to me, but the joy of anticipating a birth. Whoa. It is amazing. People are born every day. It never dawned on me the great anticipation, and I forgot, of families, of nurses and doctors' birth. And what are we about? A season of birth. And I thought, what a beautiful, beautiful statement. And then I wrote down my three things that I'm anticipating. I put number one, and they're all the same. There's not a hierarchy, but I wrote down number one. COVID gets checked. It finally reaches its match mostly. You know, viruses mutate. So we forget that. Viruses mutate. In English, you're finding that out. But mostly COVID gets pushed back. And I'm hoping that most people get vaccinated. I'm hoping most people will take the opportunity to get vaccinated. Number two, my transplant team informed me that we have not been given permission to get a vaccine because the infectious diseases department of the University of Miami said they're not sure that we are able to get a vaccine. We might have a reaction. Then the transplant coordinator said to me, you're going to do it anyway, aren't you? Moving right along. Number three, my anticipation is the orange one's obesity gets to Kraken size sooner than expected, so that 4 years from now, it will become a physical impossibility for him to run again. I don't believe I just said that. All right, those are anticipations I have. So then I came across, because I know nothing about this, have any of you heard of Dr. Paul Hokemeyer? Oh, good. Usually when I ask a question like that to this congregation, immediately 10 hands go up and say, well, of course we have. Thankfully, I found one you didn't know. Hokemeyer has spent a career examining the brain and anticipation. I bet you didn't know the brain is a muscle. I forgot that. The brain is a giant muscle. The human brain is especially evolved to anticipate and calculate an action, particularly by the prefrontal cortex. Did any of you know that when you're thinking about anticipation? Well, I didn't know that. So I started to take a look at things that he wrote about that we anticipate. We anticipate events. Think about that. Don't you ever think about anticipating events? Yes, events, however broad you may mean that. Some of you anticipate sports. I know a lot of people are into sports. Mary Grimmy has that very famous thing. What is it about football you don't like? What is the thing you wrote that was a riot? I wrote down, what is that?
Sorry, sniff.
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 What?
Shows no interest for football.
Shows no interest for football. Sniff.
Yes.
A lot of people love sports. They anticipate sports. You anticipate going on trips. Anticipate a new movie coming out. Anticipate, just think of all the events you did any of you ever have to go to a prom? Did any of you go to a prom? Well, I remember anticipating going to proms. What about anticipating music? There's a whole thing about you anticipate, you listen to a music and you anticipate a crescendo. You anticipate a magnificent end. You anticipate a riff, guitar riffs. You anticipate a climax in a symphony. I mean, depending upon what type of music you're listening to, there are all kinds of anticipations to songs. Here's one, anticipating desire. We never talk about sexuality much in sermons, and we never talk at shares rather. We never talk about desire. But what is a big thing about desire is anticipation. I won't go into any details, but that is a big part of desire is anticipating. What about the possibilities for adventure? Anticipating adventure, road trips on the spur of the moment. Did you ever notice that when somebody calls you and say, hey, let's go do something, and you say yes, the lag between their call and they're actually doing something, you build up anticipation. The second date I had with Maria Teresa was a riot. First of all, you all know, I told the story before, how I absolutely botched the first. It's in the Hall of Fame of total disasters. All right. The second date, for reasons that I have no idea, I called her out of the clear blue at 10 o'clock in the morning on a Sunday, and I said, it's me. And she goes, oh, that was not a good way to start. So I carried on anyway. And I said, let's go to the zoo. And she said, what? I said, let's go to the zoo. She said, now that's a good idea. She said, when? I said, let's go now. And then she said, good. I said, I'll pick you up in 15 minutes. And she said, and I said, wait a minute, you're going to be ready in 15 minutes? She said, yes. You said we're going to the zoo. And I said, don't you have to shower? She said, why would I shower before going to the zoo? She said, did you date much? And then I said, what about accessorizing? You don't accessorize to the zoo. She said, what kind of women did you go out with? Just come and pick me up. The anticipation between me calling her and actually picking her up was wild. And then we spent three glorious, hot, sweaty hours having a ball at the zoo. You do something, but then the anticipation between suggesting and then actually going is wild. There's all kinds of things we anticipate. Just think about that. All kinds of things we anticipate. So anticipation of events, music, desire, possibilities of adventure, possibilities of excitement, all kinds of things. This, according to Hokemeyer, exercises your brain. It causes it to expand, contract, expand, contract. It's like a physical exercise for your brain. Who knew? Secondly, another thing that's good for your brain is delaying gratification. Our society, as you well know, thrives on instant gratification. Am I right? We want everything done yesterday. Not now. We want it done yesterday. And we want stuff done now, and now. But when you have to anticipate, that means it can't be done right this minute, right? When you have to anticipate an event, You have to anticipate something. That means it hasn't yet happened, which means we've learned then, whether we like it or not, that we have to wait for something to happen. And this anticipation then is a built-in way of helping us to learn you can't have everything every time you want it. And I never thought of that way. It's a really, really helpful way of helping us break up this absolute obsession in our society with wanting everything done when we want it right now. It is also a defense mechanism. I never thought about this either. A couple of our congregants wrote here from All Souls, I guess anticipation is a double-edged sword. It can be pleasant and fun. It can also be stressful and anxiety producing. This is written by one of our members in the Arctic who said, I sit here in anticipation of snow, snow, and more snow. The National Weather Service is predicting 11 to 16 inches. They got 500 feet of snow, as it turns out. It was 1 degree. But I thought it was interesting when she wrote, in anticipation, it's a double-edged sword. It can be pleasant or fun, but it can be stressful, anxiety producing. But then while she's anticipating, guess what happened? Knowing that bad things could happen, she made plans. She made plans for when the snow comes. She made sure that she had groceries, made sure that all the things that were needed, so she was able to anticipate a disaster, and so she was prepared for the disaster. I never even thought of anticipation from that point of view. Another one of our congregants wrote, I usually love anticipating good things. When I have something good planned, the whole time leading up to it is also fun and exciting. However, if it is anticipating something that might be very good, but also a little unknown, I get anxious. Hey, if you're anticipating something unknown, that means you have to do double thinking about what if things go wrong. And when you anticipate, what does a good military commander do? A good military commander assumes the worst, and you have backup and backup plans. Am I right? You have a hurricane coming. When you're anticipating a hurricane, what do? You plan for a disaster. When you have a snowstorm coming, you plan for the snowstorm. When you have a date coming, yes, aha. For those of you who forgot what happened on my first date when I didn't anticipate this, Maria and I had a blind date in which I told students never to go on because it may not be good. I get to the movie theater and there were all kinds of people that I would not think I would be going out with. And I turn around and I hear this word, Kenneth, and I turn and there is this incredibly gorgeous, beautiful, blonde Colombian woman. And my first thought was, there is a God. And then I go up and totally blow it. This is incredible. How do warm, loving Colombians greet people? With a big hug. How do uptight Anglo-Saxon Protestants greet people? With a hand straight out, and I punched her in the stomach. And she went to give me a hug. One of the all-time fabulous ways to ruin a greeting. Yes, I never anticipated any of this thing, and in lack of anticipation, thinking I was the Rico Suave of school of cool moves. I didn't anticipate anything. The Rico Suave of has it smooth totally wiped out this gorgeous woman's stomach. At the end, I made it worse, thinking I would know how to handle a goodbye. So what does your friend Kenneth do? He keeps his hands in his pocket like a 15-year-old and says to Maria, are you ready for this? Listen to this. Drive carefully. Goodbye. Yes, my voice went up 10 octaves. And as I turned with my hands in my pockets, I said, Rico Suave of school, your voice went up 10 octaves. It was worse than a 15-year-old. Now you can see why the second date, when I said, would you go to the zoo, was an interesting follow-up to this incredible disaster. Anticipation, if you don't anticipate disasters, they're going to bite you. I never thought of anticipation as being a defense mechanism to help us out. Did any of you ever think of it that way? Anticipating disasters and bad moves is an act of helping us. Whoa. So I have some thoughts. Anticipation impacts our lives, whether we realize it or not, spiritually, religiously, and practically. And for me, they all go together. They all go together. Anticipation helps us and prepares us for sorrow, grief, and disappointment. I want you to think about that for a moment. Anticipation can help us deal with grief and sorrow and the bad times in life. Remember Rumi, when he writes, sorrow prepares you for joy. But before you get to sorrow, you need to prepare for sorrow if you can. Somebody's dying. Anticipating a bad end not only helps you, but it helps you help others around them. Anticipating what happens when bad things go. One of the things my students ask me all the time is, hey, what happens when a classmate dies? What do you say at a funeral? They're anticipating already that they're going to know friends of theirs are going to die because they've already seen somebody die in their age. They're anticipating, what do we do? That's a really brilliant question when you think about that. 17 and 18 and 19-year-olds asking an anticipation question, what do you do? What do you say? And I say, why do you have to say anything? And that always causes everybody to stop. I said, did you ever think a lot of the things you say are not helpful? Like somebody has just passed, they're young, and you want to say they're in a better place? That's really not helpful. Seriously. Or, you know, you're going to say to somebody who just lost their husband, well, they're with Jesus. I mean, really? That's going to help at that particular moment? Or you're going to say, well, you know, things happen that way. Really? I'm amazed at the number of things that people say when they go to a funeral or they go to somebody who's lost somebody that are probably the worst things that you could ever say ever. And people don't realize that. So I said to my students, why say anything? And they said, what do you mean? I said, it's known as a theology of presence. Just being there says volumes. Everybody knows the traffic in Miami is impossible. It is proof that God plays practical jokes. The traffic in Miami, it is absolutely awful. Why do you have to say anything? You're there. You come up, you give somebody a hug. Well, we can't do that now. But when we get back to normal, you give somebody a hug, you show up and you sit down and you stay. You're there. That sends volumes. People know you're busy. People know it's impossible to get to a funeral home or a home, but you show up and you stay. Does that make sense to everybody? You show up and you stay and you hug, and that's good enough. My students anticipate this. They know. They ask good questions. Good questions. So part of anticipation helps us deal with the grief and sorrow and disappointment. I remember there was an old phrase. I remember when I was running for president of the Student Council of Atlantic City High School. And one of my teachers said to me, you are doing something that nobody's ever done before. You, in this high school, at the time, the high school was the largest high school in New Jersey. It was 3,600 kids, and half the students were Black. Nobody had ever served as an officer on the student council. At the age of 16, I decided, living in no man's land, Brigantine Island, that this was all wrong, and asked buddies of mine who were Black to run with me on a student council ticket. The first 1962, the first time they'd ever had a ticket that was half Black. And a teacher said to me, what do you think? I said, I'm scared witless. This is insane. I have to get up and give a speech to 2 auditoriums. I live on Brigantine Island. That's like living in That's like living in, that's like being Montanero, Payon. It's like awful on this rural island. And she said, well, the best you can do is hope to win, but expect to lose. If you think of that way, hope to win, but expect to lose, you can anticipate losing, and then you can lose with grace and dignity. I'm not passing any words along to you know who. I'm just saying you can learn to lose with grace and dignity. I was told that at 16, anticipating, learning to deal with your disappointments in advance. And I'm going to put John on the spot here. John anticipated when I needed to leave Port Orange because of alcohol. John anticipated, and I don't want to get him upset because he'll cry about this. He anticipated that my career wasn't over. He comes to me at my house and says to me, this is not enough. You need to go to Talbot. If you go, it'll be going because you want to go, and you have a whole new life ahead of you. Trust me, you have a whole life ahead of you. Do it. John is the one who pushed me. I was out of the ministry. John pushed me to get going, to do what you need to do. He anticipated things about me that I didn't get. He's right there. He anticipated. And so his anticipation was enabling me to open chapters that I wouldn't have opened. So anticipation does incredible things. It prepares you for grief. It prepares you how to act. I never thought about that. It also prepares us to deal with our own problems. I'm tired of people saying religion is a crutch. Hello, what's wrong with a crutch when you're lame? What's wrong with a crutch when you have knee surgery, when you have hip surgery? What's wrong when you've got foot surgery? What's wrong with wearing a modern crutch known as, the help or the canes? What is wrong with that? As far as I'm concerned, crutches are pretty doggone good to help us get from point A to point B, literally, and as we heal. And if religion helps us heal, then that's what it's supposed to do, as far as I know. It's supposed to be one of those things that helps us heal. If we're healing spiritually, we can heal physically as well. And finally, anticipation gives us hope. Without hope, folks, no matter how bad things are, we're going nowhere. Rowena talks about, with the menorah, talked about how women in a concentration camp built a menorah from food. They stole some food and built a menorah. And why did they do that? Because they had hope. It's interesting when you talk to survivors from concentration camps, what is the one thing that kept them alive was their hope that things would work out. Hope. Without hope, folks, we're without anything. We're without any. And one of the good things that religion can do at its best is offer us hope. Anticipation offers us hope. It offers us inwardly and outwardly. It offers us as we look at life around us and look at life within. The Gospel of Thomas has Jesus saying, as a messenger, if you find the divine within and the divine without, then you will know what life is all about, for the divine is within you and with around you. And as you do that, you have hope because you become whole. The Gospel of Luke, in one of the most unused passages ever, in the 17th chapter, and the Pharisees said to Jesus, where is the kingdom of God? He said, it is within you and around you. The idea starts with Hinduism. Divine within, divine without. This gives us hope, and hope gives us strength, and strength gives us joy, even in the darkest of times. All of this from anticipation. Who knew? And the blessed prefrontal cortex, of which I knew nothing. So I wish all of you happy and joyous anticipation as we again have one more season of Hanukkah and Christmas and the solstice and hope. Amen. And Oscar, some transition. many people now without jobs. There are many people who are being evicted from their apartments. And that group of millionaires that are called senators in the United States Senate, who are probably not even conscious of what it means to be evicted from an apartment or having no food on their table for a week or half a week. I'm sorry, I got muted. Those millionaires in the United States Senate, senators are almost all millionaires who probably have never been without food, have never been evicted from an apartment, probably don't understand what millions of our citizens are going through right now. Enormous food lines, enormous sickness, enormous unemployment. It's skyrocketed again. Our ICUs are packed and filled. Finally have reached a breakthrough. 1 o'clock this morning, and it looks like they're finally going to be able to vote to send a package to this country to help people out. We have lots of hurting people, and I ask you to join with me as we read the following for everyone that we can think of, and even for those we don't know. Somewhere, someone fits in this list. Please read with me, if you would, for the poor and the unfortunate, for the sick and the suffering, for the tempted and bereaved, for the forgotten and lonely. Let us offer a prayer or a thought this day and every day. May it be so. Let us read it again, because I want everybody to remember that each of us have been on this list several times, somewhere on this list. This is known as Humanity 101. This is us, not only in this country, but on planet Earth. For the poor and the unfortunate, the sick and the suffering, for the tempted and bereaved, for the forgotten and lonely, let us offer a prayer or a thought this day and every day. May it be so. Amen. And let us let Jesee Norman prepare us for a meal. In a very poor family. He was born Jewish, lived Jewish, and died Jewish. And almost all of his followers in the first decades were Jewish as well. And after Jesus died in the first decades, this is before Christianity had spread to non-Jewish lands. And so the first Christian meals were called agape meals, meant of love. Very, very simple, very, very, very basic. And so when All Souls gathered, we had options and choices. Almost everybody wanted to continue the meal, but they wanted to continue it the way it was done originally. And so we went back to the very, very beginning, where you had simple bread, just simple unleavened bread, and a very simple cup. And we offered that simply by saying this is a meal. We understand other traditions have these as divine and holy mysteries, but we stuck to our Jewish roots and simply had a meal, offering bread and cup to stranger, member, seeker, anybody who came. And for many, this works. For some, it doesn't. The idea being was the table was open for all as fellowship. And so whether you took bread and cup or not, we would gather and hold hands to signify that there is unity in even the most unusual of circumstances. And then somewhere along the line, we developed these words after taking bread and cup and others coming forward to hold hands. And I'd ask you to repeat them after me. Promise me you'll remember. You are braver than you believe, stronger than you seem, smarter than you think. God didn't promise days without pain, laughter without sorrows, sun without rain. But the divine did promise strength for the day, comfort for the tears, light for the way. Now, before we continue, this is something else, and I'm not sure when we started this either. We stole this. We didn't borrow it. We stole it outright from NA and AA. In both of these groups, the idea is you can't leave if you have something bothering you. You got to work on it. How we incorporated this in our service, I have no idea. But the idea was if you're going to have bread and cup and you're going to say words and you're going to be together, if something's bothering you, you got to work on it. So does anybody have a black chip to return? Does anybody need to hold up a black chip that they've returned? Anybody? Does anybody need to pick up a black chip? Oh, this is rather scary. This is the holidays. These are the time when you pick up bucketfuls of these. Nobody has a black chip to pick up. I find this absolutely frightening. Nobody has a black chip to pick up.
No, but I have an all-purpose black chip that I take out whenever I need it. So it has gone from one incarnation to another as I progress on working on myself.
You recycle the black chip.
That's it.
All right. Let us have a concluding prayer, a final hymn, and a blessing, and then we'll say goodbyes before we go. A final prayer. May the blessings of God be upon us in this day and in the days to come. May we seek the truth more devotedly. May we think more independently. May we reflect more searchingly. We may know ourselves more completely. May we forgive more quickly. May we pray more thoughtfully. May we act more courageously. May we live more nobly. And a final send-off prayer by words called Joy to the World, originally written by George Frederick Handel, again from that great school of friends, George Fox University in California. And if you would, I will read the blessing for us. And now in this most special of seasons, may that power stronger than the brightest star, and yet found in the most common and humble of births, nurture, heal, transform, and guide us all our days. Amen. And before you run, let me say goodbye to everybody. You've taken time on this very busy, busy time. Again, Pat Sullivan in New York.